Today on Straight Talk Africa, U.S. President Barack Obama on Monday met with this year's class of the Young African Leaders Initiative, now known as the Mandela Washington Fellowship. Its goal is to provide the continent's best and brightest with the necessary tools that will develop an Africa that is strong, vibrant, and prosperous. That's coming up next right here on Straight Talk Africa. Hello, welcome to Straight Talk Africa, live from the Voice of America studios here in Washington. It's Wednesday, August 5th. I am Shaka Ssali. And welcome back, Mariama, from your special assignment in your homeland of Senegal.
Well, hello to all our viewers and listeners on the continent and elsewhere. I'm Mariama Diallo, your social media reporter, and thanks, Shaka. A whole month of coverage of West Africa on the ground. It was fulfilling and absolutely amazing, but I am happy to be back in Studio 52.
And today, we introduce to you some of Africa's promising leaders. We just completed President Barack Obama's Mandela Washington African Fellowship.
Well, I look forward to a great show today with some of our fantastic young fellows. Coming up later in our STA inbox, we'll share your thoughts on Yali through your emails, Twitter, and Facebook comments. Hope you'll stay with us.
But first, the 2015 class of the Mandela Washington Fellowship is ready to return home after harnessing their skills on Monday. U.S. President Barack Obama addressed the fellows at the summit. My colleague, Esther Githui-Yuwat, was there.
Often referred to as Africa's best and brightest, the Yali Fellows say they're ready to take their position as leaders in innovation and business and turn the African continent around with positive economic change. Welcoming the U.S. President to the podium, Grace Jerry of Nigeria echoed the feelings of most Yali Fellows about their newfound source of inspiration.
Sending us forth as young African leaders to become that change that our continent deserves. One man has shown with his life and character that change and greatness is possible if only you will try.
In his address, President Obama says this second class of Yali Fellows comes at a significant time just as he returned from a trip to Africa.
Many of you know I just returned from Africa, and it was my fourth trip to sub-Saharan Africa, more than any other U.S. president, and I was proud to be the first U.S. president to visit Kenya, the first to visit Ethiopia, the first to address the African Union, which was a great honor.
Rose Sylvia Nakafu is a Yali Fellow from Uganda. She says the program has certainly motivated her to achieve her goal.
I certainly feel empowered after an experience of 6 weeks working with communities, working with organizations just like the one I work for back home, and of course looking at the issue that I would like to contribute to solving in my country, that is youth unemployment.
Saisan Nkwashu from South Africa uses art and culture as a platform to address the high rate of youth unemployment in rural areas.
What I'm taking back with me is humanity, the spirit of Ubuntu. Learning that I am because you are because I am. We need each other as Africans. We need to connect. The world is becoming a global village.
Kezi Mukiri, a fellow from Kenya, started off as a lawyer, but is now focused on women entrepreneurship.
I have a passion for entrepreneurship because I have seen the journey of how much you can change people's lives through entrepreneurship. You create solutions, you create employment, and you even give hope to a generation that did not have hope.
Besides the Yali Regional Center in Nairobi, Kenya, President Obama announced that a new facility opened Monday in Accra, Ghana, and 2 more will be opening later in Pretoria, South Africa, and Dakar, Senegal, to empower young Africans.
That's why I launched Yali, the Young African Leaders Initiative, to help you access the resources.
Samuel Douglas Correa, a fellow from Liberia, could not agree more. He wants the youth of Africa to stop thinking about being employed and find innovative ways of self-employment.
Must start with the young people, giving them the business mindset that yes, indeed, they can take the risk and they can become great business leaders for our country.
And for Vimbisho Mashumba of Zimbabwe, President Obama's speech struck a chord among the Mandela Washington Fellows.
One of the most powerful things the president spoke about was access to education. So I was also torn between education and entrepreneurship, because I do believe that entrepreneurship is the vehicle that will bring Africa out of poverty.
President Obama implored the youth fellows to become agents of positive change in Africa by rebuilding their countries and creating an environment in which young people can succeed. Esther Gido-Ewart, VOA News, Washington.
And thanks, Esther, for that interesting report. Now joining us here in our Washington studios are three young African leaders who just completed this year's Mandela Washington Fellowship. Alice Niyonkuru, who currently serves as the office director at Long Miles Coffee Project, located in Wakene, Burundi. The project partners with over 5,000 farmers to make a positive change in the way goods are exchanged, providing them enough money to buy food, provide for their families, and send their children to school. Kamakei Freddy, Sangiriaki, director for the Neighbors Peace Initiative, where he provides leadership on the facilitation of access to justice for minority groups, conflict resolution and peace building based in Narok, Kenya. He was the winner of the Unsung Peace Heroes Award for exemplary actions to save lives during the Kenya post-election violence in 2007-2008. And last but not least, Dagnachew, Wakene of Ethiopia, who works as the Africa Regional Coordinator at Disability Rights Promotion International, a project run by York University, Canada, to establish a monitoring system that addresses disability discrimination globally. He's also the co-founder of THISAbility Consulting, an initiative which aims to bridge existing gaps of participatory disability research in Africa. Well, I have to frankly say, the three of you, that I'm profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to have the opportunity to host you on Straight Talk Africa for the first time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Shaka.
You're most welcome. Later in the program, we'll give you, the audience, a chance to call and talk with our guests. The number to call is 202-619-3111. US country code is 1. Let me come to you immediately, Alice. When you walk back to Monday, you're being addressed by President Barack Obama. Your reaction?
Wow, my reaction. I thought that Obama is extremely humble. When he's in the room, yes, he has that presence. This is Barack Obama. But he's also very humble and very relatable. So it's just a huge honor, a huge opportunity, and definitely a rare experience.
Really?
Yes.
Now, on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest and 0 being the lowest, how would you grade him so far?
Obama?
Yes.
I would say 9.99.
Interesting. What about you, Freddy? Your reaction?
Oh, it was mind-blowing, having and breathing the same air with the most powerful president in the world was just amazing for not only me, but I also hope for the 499 other fellows, because we are 500. As Ali said, I was actually amazed by his humility. He was able to mention fellows by their names. Only that he can't mention all of us, but I'm so sure he was actually in the back of his mind, had each and every fellow in the back of his mind, because he was able to actually say what these fellows are doing, what are their names, which countries do they come from. And after actually his speech, he was able to answer questions. I can't really say the number of questions, but there are so many. It took him an hour to just have a town hall with us, answer the most pressing questions that we always wanted to ask him. Several fellows asked, and they are going with probably the video of us, or the questions that were asked in that forum. And then when he finished, he came down, went around, I think shook hands with around 100 of us. And I think that was amazing for me.
Now, in your particular case, Freddy, given that it's not long ago that President Obama, in Kasarani Stadium, near Nairobi, he actually says, of course, I am also the first Kenyan American president of the United States. How does that feel? How do you relate to that, being a Kenyan yourself?
I'm so proudly associated with President Obama, and that having come from his mouth, that actually confirms to me that I'm related to him, at least by sharing one nation, having come from Kenya. So that actually makes me proud, and we are so glad that he came before at least he got out of the presidency.
What about you, Dag? You come from Ethiopia, and the president, of course, was in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, Africa's de facto capital. Your feelings?
Well, first of all, Shaka, that Monday morning, I was speechless. I usually don't run out of words because I'm a lawyer, but that day, I didn't have any word to describe what I was feeling. I was tweeting and I was trying to provide status updates on what was happening, but it was just impossible for me to describe the feeling, because this is a man who beat a lot of odds, who sailed against all odds. And me coming from the disability community, growing up in Ethiopia with a post-polio physical disability since I was a child, it resonates with me a lot, because beating odds is what kind of feeling that brings, to you. So it was a powerful moment for me.
What did you specifically take from his speech, his address to you Monday?
Well, first of all, he was welcomed by a person with disability.
Correct.
That was monumental.
The lady from Nigeria.
Exactly, Grace Jerry, who was with us at the presidential precinct at the University of Virginia and College of William and Mary. We were together the past 6 weeks talking about disability issues, and she eventually had an opportunity to introduce him on stage. That brings inclusion high on the map. In itself, it speaks volumes. It tells that disability can indeed be a source of power, a source of pride, and a source of captivating, performance. So it really meant a lot that Grace introduced him. And many of the messages that he delivered on that stage were very impactful for us.
Now, when you left that particular meeting, I'm sure you talked to some people, either back in Canada or in Addis Ababa and what have you. What did you tell them?
Well, I'm still telling about this. It's now 3 days since we had that summit. I'm still talking to them. I'm still digesting it. The ecstasy is still there. There are 2 messages that I picked in particular. The fact that there will be a similar kind of initiative to be launched next year for American youth to go back to Africa and learn from Africans was one of the exciting news that I heard about. That tells me that Africa is not just a recipient, it's also a giver. So that was an exciting news. And of course, like I said, the fact that a person with disability introduced him, for me, it was impactful. So I'm still telling the story. I still need to digest it. We're only 48 hours into the excitement. So, yeah.
Very interesting. Now we'll pause for a short break and would like to remind you that Straight Talk Africa is now on the social networking website Twitter, and we are tweeting live. Follow us at VOA Shaka. That's VOA Shaka, and join today's discussion with your questions and comments. Don't forget to use the hashtag at VOA 2015, Mandela Yali or VOA 215 Yali. And we are still on Facebook. Just enter the keyword Straight Talk Africa, become a fan, and connect with other friends of the Voice of America. We'll be right back with you, so please don't go away.
President Obama announced on Monday the expansion of the Mandela Washington Fellowship for Young African Leaders initiative. Signature aspects of this expansion include Yali Regional Leadership Centers opened in Ghana and Kenya this year, with 2 others in Senegal and South Africa to follow in 2016. That same year, up to 80 Americans will participate in a reverse exchange, traveling to Africa to work directly with Mandela Washington Fellow alumni and institutions across the continent. The Yali network has grown to over 140,000 members who will now have access to expanded online courses, including 3 new courses called the Mandela Washington Fellowship Institute. President Obama affirmed that next year the Mandela Washington Fellowship will expand to 1,000 participants.
Like Voice of America on Facebook. Follow VOA on Twitter. Join VOA on our YouTube channel. Like, follow, join VOA.
This is Straight Talk Africa on the Voice of America. What is your opinion about today's topic? Call us at 202-619-3111. U.S. country code 1. When you call, remember the following. Ask only one question. Keep your comment brief and turn down the volume on your radio or television. Now let's return to Straight Talk Africa.
I am inspired by Shaka Ssali, a Ugandan journalist who works with Voice of America. And my message to you is keep inspiring us, African leaders who are rising to take on leadership. And Voice of America is such a powerful tool that has given me the opportunity to share my vision and dreams for my country.
Welcome back, and with humility, it may be interesting to note that today's edition of Straight Talk Africa marks 15 years on the air, on the Voice of America. It was first broadcast on August the 2nd, 2000, from the famous Studio 18. Thanks to Mandela Washington Fellow, Cinderella Anena from Uganda, Kitgum, and others like her. Our vast audience from around the continent and the global African diaspora of millions of you for supporting us over the last 15 years, and we hope you continue to do the same. We'll have a proper celebration later this year. Now, before the break, of course, we were interacting with these very interesting Mandela Washington Fellows, and of course, I'm back to you. What about you, Alice? How does that feel for you, in fact, to be participating in what appears to be a historic edition of Straight Talk Africa?
Wow.
Today marks the 15th year of the program.
Wow, it's yet another opportunity. This is amazing. We're at the right place at the right time. Thank you for this chance.
You're most welcome.
Thank you for this chance.
Now, back to your interaction with President Obama. When you go back to Bujumbura, what is the first thing that you're going to share with your family and your immediate friends about the experience you've been part of, really?
Well, I'm going to share with them about the leadership experience I've received here. Just meeting with Congressman John Lewis, meeting with Ambassador Young, meeting with key people, key leaders who were involved in the civil rights movement. You know, it's just extremely humbling to hear those stories and hear how they're human, normal human beings who brought a lot of change. You know, it is possible. They bridged this gap, this generational gap that we see. So I will share that experience. It changed my whole perspective on leadership as a whole, that you make it your own, that you have to be yourself in leadership. Because a lot of times we succumb to the pressures that we feel from society, from our immediate environments of what leadership should be like. But after talking to key leaders and even a lot of staff from the Georgia State University, leadership is yours. You make it your own, and you have to be you because you're standing up for something, and you have a lot of people following you. if you're not yourself, you're misleading many people.
Where did you spend the last 6 weeks?
I spent the last 6 weeks in Georgia State University in Atlanta. Yes.
So are you now convinced that, in fact, you may very well be a disciple of the president's mantra, which is, yes, we can?
Oh, yes, of course we can. I will add, of course we can.
Interesting. What about you, Freddy? Where did you spend the last 6 weeks?
I spent at the presidential precinct. That is the conglomeration of the University of Virginia and the College of William and Mary. So we were...
University of Virginia at
Charlottesville and Williamsburg, College of William and Mary.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So how are you now part of this group that subscribes to the president's mantra, yes, we can?
Yes, and I'll give you in the context of Africa, the solutions to African problems lies in Africans themselves. And so it's upon us as the Mandela Washington Fellows to spread the word and transfer the knowledge to the youth back in Africa.
When we keep hearing, of course, African leaders talking about African solutions to African problems. But frankly, we still see them coming up short. What about your generation? Are you going to do better than us and the other generations that have been in charge of the continent for many, many years?
You've done up to where you can. So I don't think we are going to do better than you, but we are going to do more than you.
Better? Why can't you? Because after all, you are going to stand on our shoulders, which gives you the opportunity to see a little bit further than all of us.
I've said we are going to do more than you've done, especially the Mandela Washington Fellows, that we have gotten the skills, we have the will, we have the spirit, and it's now upon us to go back to Africa and make these solutions to African problems a reality. Maybe it's not still a reality, and that's why I'm saying more. That's why I am sticking to them more, so that we are going to make it a reality. And that's where the more comes in. Yeah.
What about you, Dag? Where did you spend the last 6 weeks, and what did you learn from there?
Like Freddy, I spent the last 6 weeks at the Presidential Precinct, which is a collaborative initiative of the University of Virginia, College of William and Mary. We spent the first 6 weeks at the University of Virginia at Charlottesville, and then the fourth week at Montpellier, which is the home of James Madison, the fourth president of the United States. We talked about constitutional law at the very place where the United States Constitution was discussed and drafted. That was a powerful experience because whether we like it or not, the U.S. Constitution continues to inspire a number of constitutions globally, and it's an example for having survived all these years without being modified or changed. Now, coming from Africa, we know how many times constitutions change within a decade or two.
Are those constitutions, to the best of your knowledge, after all, you are a lawyer, are those constitutions, or are they perhaps what some might characterize as personal manifestos?
Well, our perspectives might differ on that particular issue, but yes, I don't dare to call them constitutions because they don't seem to have roots in our societies, in our body politics back home. So I wouldn't say personal manifestos as such, because in some cases there are instances where discussions were made, consultations were made, and constitutions were drafted, but they just could not have deep roots for one reason or another. So we talked about constitutions at Montpellier, and then we spent the last 2 weeks at the College of William and Mary, which is the second oldest higher learning institution in the United States, next to Harvard University.
Correct.
And that was also another inspiring experience. You know, that's a historical place hosted at the city of Williamsburg. where there were lots of narratives about slavery, slave trade, and etc. So we learned and unlearned some lessons. We thought we knew a lot about issues of slavery, but it gave us an exposure to come here beyond reading to see what exactly was happening and to take a look at the actual situation here. So that's how I spent the past 6 weeks in Virginia.
How many were you at the University of Virginia?
We were 25 from 21 countries.
That is very interesting because it may be interesting for you to note that I personally consider myself to be an alumni, having been invited by the University of Virginia at Charlottesville last year.
Interesting.
To have the honor and opportunity to address and interact with the class of last year. Which was made up of 27, 28 fellows.
Interesting.
Very interesting place.
We wish we had you around this time as well.
Maybe, well, we had another opportunity to meet here, and maybe next time we meet somewhere else.
Exactly.
Very interesting. Now, let's stay at this constitutionalism business.
Yes.
You know, of course, that recently when the president addressed the African Union
for the first time
Commission, he talked about this disturbing issue of term limits, of people who want to be presidents for life. How do you react to that?
Well, that's the truth. Those statements in the president's speech at the African Union about term limits, about presidents wanting to stick to power while they have all the resources they need if they wanted to step aside from power, he said that he just could not understand why they do that. So those narratives are our narratives as youth of Africa, as emerging leaders of Africa. There has to be term limits. Power should not be, or authority should not be a lifetime business, which is how it is the case in Africa. So yeah, we do familiarize ourselves with those narratives, and we subscribe to them as emerging leaders of the continent.
In your particular case, of course, the late Prime Minister Meles Zenawi was smart enough to stay away from that issue because he introduced a parliamentary system where you have a Prime Minister who is the head of government, and therefore you don't have to worry, in fact, electing an individual. You elect parties, and whichever party or coalition or alliances of parties win power, they choose or appoint a Prime Minister. But what about the fact that as we hear now, in your country, the ruling party, the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, EPRDF, the ruling party, is actually 100% democracy in your country. It controls 547 seats in the National Assembly, both the upper and lower houses. How do you react to that? Is that humanly possible, really?
Well, I would say that there's always a room for improvement. Our country is trying to be a democratic nation. That I know because I'm based in Addis. I'm talking from a practical point of view, not from a remotely understood kind of point of view. So I know that we're making steps in the right direction. You're talking about a democracy that's only 24 years old. So it is emerging to be as good as it can be. Are we there yet? No, we are very far from where we should be. And the instance that you just mentioned signifies that. But that doesn't mean that we're not in the right direction. I believe that Ethiopia is on the right track of development and democratical involvements and etc., with all improvements that need to be made.
Someone, of course, might come back to you and say, how do you compare the elections of 2005 and the elections of 2015, and you tell me you're making progress?
Well, yes, I still maintain that we're making progress. In 2005, there was a different phenomena. There were political parties that were strong enough to compete with the government. It so happened that this year and 5 years ago as well, the political parties, there might have been divisions between them. It's not clear to me. I'm not a political expert per se, but I can tell you that we are definitely in the right direction, and there are lots of improvements that need to be made on behalf of the Ethiopian people to reflect the actual voice of the Ethiopian people. So as a person who is not a political expert and as an electoral expert as well, what I can tell you is that we're just on the right track.
Thank you very much. You're tuned into Straight Talk Africa. We'll have more of a discussion in a moment. But first, here is Mariama Jaro. Take it away, Mariama.
Well, thanks, Shaka. Still to come, we'll reveal some of the outstanding feedback we've received from our audience through social media. Meanwhile, here is our letter of the week. Omunua Okugbo from Abuja in Nigeria writes, the Yali Mandela Washington Fellows can build bridges of understanding and friendship between Africa and the United States by influencing the young people on both continents to see one another's interests as one. Mandela Fellows must inspire young Africans to greatness with genuine leadership actions. They must also demonstrate to young Americans that Africa has many positive contributions to make, both in the present and future, to the development of mankind.
I wanted to present music and a side of American culture that is most important to me, that is a part of who I am. They're going to get some incredible performances. That's one of the things I love, bringing these artists in so you can get to see them do what they do. It's soul music, and that's what music is. It's that which comes from the soul.
This is Straight Talk Africa on the Voice of America. Call us now with your questions and comments. The number is 202-619-3111 and the U.S. country code is 1. Call us direct and we'll call you right back. Remember to turn down the volume on your radio or television and keep your comments brief. Now back to Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you very much, Esther Gizu-Yuwat, and welcome back to Straight Talk Africa, live from Washington. Once again, it's time to bring in my colleague and social media reporter, Mariama. Take it away again, Mariama.
Well, thanks, Shaka. President Obama's initiative continues to empower young Africans through leadership training, academic studies, and networking. Mr. Obama also said this week that up to 80 Americans will participate in a reverse exchange, traveling to Africa to work directly with Mandela Washington Fellow alumni and other young people and institutions across the continent. The president's announcement leads us to our question of the week, asking, what is the best way for Yali Mandela Washington Fellows to build a bridge between America and Africa? Well, first, thanks for using all our social media platforms to communicate to us. Let's begin with a comment from Mohamed Ahmed Mansour from Monrovia in Liberia, who writes, I think the Mandela Washington Fellows should exhibit the skills and leadership needed to instill the discipline into other young people. After returning home, fellows should continue to build on the skills they've developed during their time in the U.S. through support from U.S. embassies, leadership centers, the Yali network, and customized programming and affiliated partners. Well, great advice there. Another reminder that we are tweeting live today. Just use the hashtag VOA 2015 Mandela Yali or VOA 2015 Yali. And if you haven't yet, please follow us on Twitter. And speaking of it, let's go to some tweets from Jacob Eyeru, an East African Community Youth Ambassador from Uganda, who writes, members of the Yali network can inspire a generational wave in Africa for young people well organized for support. And Jacob continues with another tweet in which he says, this wave of young people would be bound by the ideals of common good as Africans. Well, Shaka and guests, your take on these comments.
Very interesting. What about you, Alice? How do you react to that?
Wow, I love the part about, taking back what you've learned back into your country. Simply because this whole experience we weren't selected because we are the most brilliant people in our own countries. We're selected because we had people walk alongside us, encourage us. We were at the right place at the right time.
Aren't you really trying to be a little bit modest?
Not at all.
You must be smart.
I have met brilliant minds in Burundi, brilliant, who, for example, Burundi is a francophone country. They may not have had that chance because this program is an anglophone program, and that's okay, but the whole point and purpose of this is to take back what we've had, that opportunity that we had, bring it back to our country. For me personally, I would love to bring all my networks and all the partnerships that I've established back into Burundi, whether it's with MedShare or Books for Africa. But this wasn't for me. This is for Burundi. And I represent Burundi and all of Africa.
So you seem definitely to agree with one of your colleague fellows from South Africa who earlier said that he taps into the human experience, Ubuntu. Ubuntu. I am because you were. We are because I am.
Yes.
Terrific. What about, Mariama, please, any more reaction from the audience?
While talking about Burundi, I'm just going to take an advantage and say hello to a very, very good friend of mine whom I've known for years. He actually studied at the University of Cheikh Anta Diop in Dakar. I think 20 years later, we are still in touch. His name is Zain Tenderesa. So if you're watching us and all the Burundians, we really just take advantage and say hello to you guys. We'll move on to a posting from Wilfred Kuseme Rewa from Kampala in Uganda, who writes, fake Africans will always shy away from the truth. If it's good for America, it should be good for Africa. Why should young Africans have to scramble to go to America? It's simple. Africa has failed to provide for its people due to corruption and poor governance. Well, let's take a look at another Facebook comment, this time from Yahya Ahmed Gumel of Jigawa in Nigeria, who writes, this is indeed a positive decision worthy of celebration because Africa's young people lack empowerment and the needed technical and entrepreneurial skills to realize their potential. A lack of these skills has opened up African youth for exploitation by venal politicians and terrorist organizations. But with the empowerment of Africa's youth through various skills programs, unemployment and crime will significantly reduce. President Obama, you are welcome. Carry on. Well, Shaka and guests.
Interesting. What about you, Freddy? Are your views on the same page, like we just heard?
Yeah, I want to agree that corruption is in Africa and it's affecting every aspect of our lives, economic, social, and the every other aspect.
And your country especially?
No, I want to say
position.
Corruption is a global phenomenon.
Correct.
I would not want to peg on any African nation. It is.
The problem is whether you have an effective mechanism in place and you really have the political will to deal with it.
So I wouldn't want to peg on any African nation. It's there. We have to agree.
What about reports from Transparency International? Should we overlook them?
No, we should act on them. Don't overlook them. I wouldn't agree that there is corruption, but the aspect here is, are there structures in place to counter?
The structures may be there, but are they being used effectively to do what they're supposed to do? It could simply having structures with no budget, simply to take you through the motions.
Yeah, to some level they are working. In
Kenya?
In the context of my country, I came and I'm following. There is a list going of people who want to really look at and say, step back, step down, step aside, and let's investigate these cases. There are still suspects.
In Uganda?
There is. Also infrastructure. There is a structure, I think, across the continent.
There is a Minister of Ethics and Integrity, but if you look very carefully, they probably don't even have a budget to boot. There is the Director of Public Prosecutions. You can be told all these sorts of things. But the last time I was being told by an analyst who told me that if he had the dubious privilege of analyzing, for example, the ruling party in Uganda, the NRM, under President Yoweri Museveni, for about 30 years in power next January, he would probably say that the single most accomplishment by that government, in his view, not mine, is the successful institutionalization of corruption and impunity.
And that's where the aspect of better and more, let me take you back. The Mandela Washington Fellows will want to really work on values to take our generation and the future to the next level. Let what has been done in the past remain, but as the Mandela Washington Fellows and other young leaders in Africa have this in mind, that we must change the narrative.
You are inspired.
I'm very inspired.
And it's not just about being patriotic to your stomach. It is to your community, to your country, to the continent.
We are fed up with the politics of the stomach.
I like that.
True. So what we are going to change is this narrative that we are a hotbed, like which another media stations or another media house said in America. We are a hotbed of corruption, poverty, and other bad things about Africa. We are going to arise. Africa is going to rise up again and going to change. And people will very soon come to Africa to learn. Because one of the things that we really know is that every cloud has a silver lining.
Correct.
So it is in our hearts, it's in our minds, in our goal, and it's our time.
After all, the intellectual balance of power has actually been shifting in your favor. Well, thanks, Mariama, for bringing us this week's audience reaction.
Well, I'll already say that Africa is on the rise. Africa is on the move. I'm not saying it. I am actually saying it, but President Obama has said it, other African presidents. I'm going to use my own, President Macky Sall. So it is on the rise. It is on the move. And I think the newest component of this YALI, which is also taking 80 Americans to Africa, because we have something to teach as well. So that one is really a welcome new component of this YALI. Well, this will do it for today's social media segment. Just a reminder that we appreciate all the feedback, whether it's in social media form or using other means to communicate to us. Please, please keep them coming. And if you are a new fan, just drop us a line at africatv@voanews.com. Once again, our email address is africatv@voanews.com. Or post your comment on our Facebook page. Just enter the keywords Straight Talk Africa. Be sure to visit us online at voaafrica.com, or you can join our YouTube channel. Sign up to VOA TV to Africa. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at VOA Shaka. And last but not least, you can watch Straight Talk Africa streaming live every Wednesday. Go to VOA Straight Talk Africa television program page on the Voice of America website. Well, now let's take a look at what's on tap for next week's program. On the next edition of Straight Talk Africa, around the world, the killing of Zimbabwe's beloved Cecil the Lion angered people and highlighted sport hunting in Africa. Join host and his guest as they examine trophy hunting and what can be done to safeguard protected and endangered species like lions, elephants, and rhinos. That's next week, right here on Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the lifeline of the show, which are the telephone callers. And I gather that there is a caller from Uganda. Good evening. You are most welcome to Straight Talk Africa. Freddy?
Thank you, Shaka. How are you?
Hugely terrific. How are you today?
I am Frank, and I'm calling from the beautiful town of Kabale.
You can't be serious, because obviously that happens to be a place I call home. It is near and dear to my heart.
That's very true, Shaka. I have to congratulate you for, and of course, Straight Talk Africa finishing 15 years on air. Africa has been blessed by that program.
Profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled for your compliments, Frank.
And I just want to say thank you for bringing those young African leaders. I am watching them and just being excited to see that there is hope for Africa. That lady from Burundi has just inspired me, knowing what is taking place back home, and she's there sounding positive and, speaking positively. I'm really, really excited, and I have to appreciate her and the rest of the team there. And also to say that it was good for President Obama to come and visit Africa. He's really inspiring leaders and also showing us a good future. We really appreciate it.
You're most welcome. Do you have any specific question, or you just had a comment, Fred?
Can I ask those leaders and ask them most sincerely, do they see a future for them and for a change in Africa? I know they are being inspired. The program they are on is good, but do they really see for sure that there will be a change, corruption that we are seeing and so on, and bad leadership? Will they really be a change agent for Africa?
Thank you very much. What about that, Doug? Would you like to hit that? That's a question from my hometown, sweet home, Kavali.
Thank you for that question. Yes, there is a significant hope for change. That's why we're all here. That's why we have aspirations about this program. We've been here for 6 weeks. Some of us will continue for another 6 weeks. And there has been a lot of resources mobilized to make this program happen. I think from the side of the part of Africa, to use these young Africans back home as a source of change is important. And talking about disability in particular, which is the topic that I work on, that's what I'm an expert in. So I am supposed to go back home and increase my involvement on issues of disability inclusion. As you mentioned in your introduction, for example, I work for an organization called Disability Rights Promotion International, which is all about monitoring to what extent the rights of people with disabilities are being respected at home and in different African countries. So far, what we have, the fact is that it is gloomy in terms of how people with disabilities are being treated, in terms of how included they are in the laws and policies of our nations, but it's not hopeless. And programs like this, platforms like YALI, give us an opportunity to do even more by knowing about what other African countries are doing. Imagine 21 African countries coming under one roof and discussing what they're doing in their home countries about various issues. So I ask about what is being done on disability issues in Kenya, in Burundi, and I try to give them a lesson from what I know, and they give me lessons from what they know as well. So this is an important platform of interaction which will bring change. So yes, we do have a hope for change. In fact, without that hope, we don't even, there's no reason for our existence as well. So we do have a hope that this will change a lot of things.
I hear you. Thank you very much. A reminder that you are tuned into Straight Talk Africa. To participate in our discussion, please call us at 202-619-3111. The US country code is 1. We'll continue our discussion in a moment, so please don't go away.
The Mandela Washington Fellowship is open to young African leaders who meet the following criteria. 500 fellows selected from almost 50,000 extraordinary young African leaders who apply online from October 7th, 2014 to January 2015. Eligible candidates must have been citizens of and residents in a sub-Saharan African country, proficient in spoken and written English, between the ages of 25 and 35 years old at the time of application. 6 weeks of study at a U.S. college or university in June 2015 in one of 3 tracks: business and entrepreneurship, public management, civic leadership. Participation in a summit with President Obama and other world-renowned leaders in Washington, D.C. Selected fellows will remain in the U.S. for an additional 8 weeks to participate in internships in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Continued opportunities in Africa to network, develop as leaders, and serve others.
We are able to touch on things that are important to people on an everyday basis. We hope that our viewers are getting inspired when they watch our show. They're getting a view of the world from a different perspective, things that perhaps are not in their immediate vicinity. Today, I could put in on the show something that is a little different, a little unique, and this gives me that inspiration to come to work.
If you like today's show, please write and tell us what you think or give us some suggestions. Be sure to tell us what station you're tuned into. Our address, Straight Talk Africa, Voice of America, 330 Independence Avenue Southwest, Washington, D.C. 20237 USA. Or send us an email at africatv@voanews.com. Log on to our website at voaafrica.com. Or post your comments on Facebook. Keywords Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you very much, Esther Githui-Ewart, and welcome back to Straight Talk Africa, coming to you live from Washington. Let's go back to the lifeline of the show, which are the telephone callers, and to the other side of the African continent. Good evening, Patrick from Nigeria. You're most welcome to Straight Talk Africa.
Good evening, Mr. Shaka. Good evening, our guests in the studio.
I'm hugely terrific. How are you today?
Patrick Okorafor of Hakufu, Nigeria. My question goes to my sister there in the studio. My question is to our sister, how will you translate what you have gathered there during that 6 weeks to African youth? Knowing fully well that in Africa today, there are a lot of vices in Africa, ravaging the continent, and most of our youths young graduates depends on government white-collar job. You see them with applications going to the government office looking for jobs. How will you encourage them so that they will be independent of their own, not dependent on the government? Thank you very much. Patrick Okorafor, Hakufu here in Nigeria.
Thank you. Go for it, Alice.
Well, thank you, Patrick. We definitely see that, for Burundi being 60% youth, there is definitely a generational gap. And what I'm working on is mentorship programs to bridge this gap, and sort of get in the minds of youth and everyone on board to see that, you can bring change, to see the options, to see the opportunities. This can happen in a number of ways. It can happen through incubators. It could happen through career fairs. It could happen through connecting Burundi to the rest of Africa, having some sort of forum. It could happen in a number of ways. And this I will definitely take back to Burundi. One project at a time, of course, but certainly not impossible.
Very interesting. Does the Yale or the Mandela Fellowship give you a unique experience that you probably would have not gotten anywhere, because it puts you, frankly, in a situation where, whether you like it or not, you can actually interact with the rest of your colleagues across the continent?
Right. Well, the Mandela Washington Fellowship Program, it exposed us to so many people, so many courses. We went from education to tax revenue forecast to so much information. And the way you use this information is up to you. It's up to you. What you take back to your country, it's up to you. And even for Burundi, anyone, whoever you are, you make your own reality. You have the power to bring change, to bring actual visible change. And if you don't see it, let someone help you. Always have an advisor. I'm working in mentorship programs, but I myself need a mentor. There's never an age where you no longer need an advisor or a mentor. So this is what I would encourage people. Always find someone who's walked in the shoes you're about to walk in, the path you're about to take. It's never, it's never too late. But most of all, Africa, we are sitting on a pot of gold. We just need to see this. We need to see our value. We need to see that change. We can bring the change we want. It's up to us.
That's why they say in the land of the blind, the one eye is king. Well, let's go to Uganda. Good evening, Dennis. You're most welcome to Straight Talk Africa.
Good evening, my brother Shaka. It's long time.
Ndugu Shaka is hugely terrific. How are you today?
Yeah, Uganda is okay, quite okay, and Mira is fairly okay today.
You have a minute?
I am greatly honored to having had the opportunity to participate in this discussion. And I should also like to congratulate the people of America for having allowed our brother, the President of the United States, to come and check on Africa. I particularly want to make a small comment on this fellowship of the Mandela Washington.
You have a minute, Dennis.
I would only want to reserve my position and advising my fellow young Africans who are joining this fellowship, so that while they are in the United States of America, they shouldn't be thinking that they have a rented ideas. They should be believing that this is an institution with an African with a very big potential, a very big prospect, so that while in America, they should come back and exhibit exactly, not ever thinking that they were favored to having had the opportunity to join this fellowship, but to come back and implement what they have learned and shared with the people of America, so that Africa should get to begin to work. Not just talking where we believe in strong men and strong women in Africa. That should stop. I wish to stop here. Thank you, my brother.
Thank you very much. You heard him, Dennis Freddy. He says we have to stop simply talking the talk and walk the talk, so that the people of Africa can walk the walk.
True.
How do you do that?
Thank you very much, Dennis. It's actually my neighbor. In fact, I don't know him, but he's in Uganda.
In fact, he's your real neighbor. If those artificial borders were not there,
they weren't.
You wouldn't need a visa or any stamp in your document, would you?
I wouldn't. I just go through Busia.
Those borders don't belong to Africans.
Yeah.
They serve the interests of other people.
Yeah, and
they need to be removed.
We are actually working on the East African community. So Dennis, we are coming to actually implement and use the spaces available for us as young African leaders to make sure that this information that we got here are actually going to the right audience. And those are the youth and everybody else in our countries and in Africa. So we have the Yali network. I had...
you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, there is the Yali network, our embassies, there is a US Department of State back in Africa that ensuring the spaces are there to make sure that this information and the mentoring that Alice is talking about is made to come to reality. And again, we have the regional center set up in Nairobi, Kenya. I invite every fellow from within the region to come and experience a center, and every other center, the South, which is actually coming up in South Africa and in Senegal, those infrastructure,
Unfortunately, time happens not to be our best ally, Freddy. On that note, thanks to our distinguished guests, Kamakei Freddy, Sangiriaki, Director for the Neighbors Peace Initiative based in Narok, Kenya, Alice Niyonkuru, Office Director at Long Miles Coffee Project located in Bukeye, Burundi, and last but not least, Dagnachew Wakene of Ethiopia, who is the Africa Regional Coordinator at Disability Rights Promotion International based in Canada. He's also the co-founder of THISAbility Consulting. Thanks to our affiliate stations, along with our viewers and listeners, we thank you for tuning in. For many of our Voice of America radio affiliates, Learning English is coming up next, and tomorrow morning's Daybreak Africa with James Bate. On behalf of the Voice of America, thanks for tuning into Straight Talk Africa. In the meantime, get better, not bitter Africa, and please remember to keep the African hopes alive.